Church family. It is Wednesday, May 20th. And if you're tuning and watching this, thank you for giving your time to it. I appreciate it. I hope they're helpful. I want to talk about our words and our treatment of people that we disagree with today. I want to talk about the way we're handling our adversaries. If we have any, I suppose maybe we all have at least one person in our life who might be considered an adversary. You know, today, or this week, is a sad week for the larger Christian community. We lost a great one, Ravi Zacharias. Don't know if you know Ravi. Ravi, unfortunately, he lost his life to cancer. He's with the Lord, and I praise that. But Ravi was a renowned Christian apologist. Traveled the world, spoke in very hostile environments, universities, different institutions. And Ravi was just really pivotal for me. At a very young age, I read his book, Jesus Among Other Gods, probably in my late teens, early 20s, and really was just captivated by that book. Even though I don't think I fully understood all the arguments he was making, but I was still captivated by it. And I just listened to him all through my 20s, and he really shaped a lot of my understanding of the gospel. And so I'm so thankful for him and his work. But I was thinking of him particularly in a little bit of short time that I want to speak to you, because he wasn't just brilliant in the way he argued for the gospel. He was brilliant in the way he handled disagreement, the way he handled his adversaries. You know, he would go into these institutions and universities with a crowd full of people who really staunchly disagreed with his position. And although he disagreed, although he debated politely, he maintained a certain love, respect. He maintained the other person's dignity. He recovered even in some ways their own humanity in the midst of the conversations that he would have. He would always invite them up, maybe shake their hand. He would ask for their names. He would ask if they would stay after. To maybe get to know them more. Man, he was just so good at that, and you can look up videos, many videos where he would do that, and he really practiced. You know, there's these places in the New Testament where Paul talks about how we handle disagreement, like Colossians 4, where he says, "Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time." And then he says this: "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." That seasoned with salt just means like speak in ways in front of people, particularly I would say when you're in the midst of a disagreement, where you're being wise with your words, you're trying to be attractive with your words. In other words, you're trying to speak in ways that you're not attempting to shut someone down, but instead you're trying to draw them out, like pull them out and get to know them on a deeper level and have them maybe experience you on a deeper level. One thing that is so clear to me, more clear to me than whether this virus is deadly or not deadly, what is more abundantly clear for me personally, and I hope for you, is that not so what the condition of this virus as much as the condition of our disagreements and the way we handle them, like the way we handle our words in the midst of our disagreements. Because there's no shortage of disagreements, if you've noticed. We've got disagreements over governments, place, and authority. We've got disagreements over masks. Some people esteem the mask. Some people do not esteem the mask. And, you know, you're always going to run into an adversary everywhere you go. You wear the mask, you might get a look. You don't wear the mask, you might get a look. I don't know. It's just, there's so many things about the way we're all looking at this particular time. And there's just a lot of disagreement. You see it in the news. You see it on social media for sure. You might be experiencing it in your workplace, whatever that looks like for you in this season. And you might be experiencing it at home or in the midst of family members. I don't know. How are you handling your adversaries? That's the question I've been asking. How do I handle people who disagree with me? Because we're going to come up against we're going to come against disagreements, right? Like, let me be clear. Like, the Bible never asks or expects us to live a life where we don't encounter disagreement. That's ridiculous. We know that. I mean, even as Christians, instead the Bible is spending time preparing us for a life where we will encounter disagreement. Where we will encounter people who disagree with us, and how should we handle ourselves in the midst of that? The thing is when we are facing disagreement, we're called to still be gentle, patient, loving, respectful, having speech that's seasoned with salt. And I'm talking both, and hear me, both inside and outside, right? Like inside your circle within the church as well as outside. Both are really, really important. You know, the often touted but rarely practiced passage on love, the famous passage on love, right, that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13. It says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. And hear this. This is the one part of that long, beautiful passage Paul writes about love that I want to press. That I just want to maybe sink in for us. Paul says love does not insist on its own way. So the question I'm asking myself, the question I would love for you to ask yourself, what opinions are you holding right now? What opinions am I holding right now during this time that have evolved a little bit over time into me insisting on my own way? You know, the things that I mentioned, the opinions I have about government or leadership, the opinions I have about the community at large, the opinions I have about masks, about health, about leadership. And opinions are okay. Like, I'm not saying we should go around not caring about any of these issues. That's not. But when we encounter people living according to a different standard or a different perspective, what's the way in which we engage them? Are we arrogant, boastful, proud? Do we insist on our own way? Are we placing our love for people above our rights? One of the amazing, fascinating things about the early church, like as soon as the church took off after the resurrection, it wasn't long after that, where the church really, after Pentecost, where the church really began to grow in numbers and God was moving in the midst of them. I would say that one of the number one reasons, if you really do the work in the history and you study them, that really set them on fire, that really launched the church, was the way they behaved when their rights were being stripped of them. They would go out and preach the gospel, and then they would say things and they would proclaim the excellencies of Christ. They would get reprimanded, called in, locked up. They would get whipped and flogged for these things, and then they would get released and they would be rejoicing, slapping high fives about it. It'd be all because it says, you can read about this stuff in Acts, some of which, and it's because they found it amazing that they got an opportunity to exalt in Jesus, and it cost them something. They got to display a generosity, a charity, a love, a patience, a long endurance. They got to be able to display it to a world that didn't know what that looked like, and they were excited about that. And I think about that, and I think, man, I hear some of the stuff that's coming out of my mouth, maybe, and the mouths of others in the churches, and maybe in your mouth, of the way, just the anger in the midst of our disagreements and our rights and our privileges and what's wrong, right, and what's wrong. And we're not just like, so often I wonder why we're not placing love as our highest goal here, laying down my rights or laying down certain things. And I mean, I'm not saying we should become doormats. I mean, that's not what I'm prescribing here. I'm just simply encouraging us to consider ways in which we really desire having an opportunity to, in the midst of maybe disagreement, of really showing other people that we disagree with how much we love and honor them in spite of the disagreement, and how we want to work with them and draw them out and understand them on a deeper level. And instead of bringing accusations or opinions, laying some of that aside and instead asking more questions and drawing them into a relationship as opposed to shutting it down because we see this thing in different ways. And look, I get it. Sometimes we get into situations where there's a no-win. You wear the mask into the store. You make the non-mask person maybe upset, or you don't wear the mask and you make the mask person upset. And sometimes you can't win. So you do the best you can, as gently and as patiently and as lovingly as you can. This is the Christian way. This is I didn't invent it. And if you disagree, I still love you. And I hope I'm not betraying what I'm saying here. And I know I often do betray it. May we all get better in Christ. Reach out, connect with me. I would love to hear from you. I miss you all. Love you all. Praying for you. Peace be with you.